Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. This is your host, Amna Ahmed, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Welcome back to another episode of Next Gen, where we speak to young people who are addressing the issues and problems in their own communities. Last episode, actually on Next Gen, we spoke on France's hijab ban and how advocacy in spaces and places where people are marginalized, oppressed, and suppressed is so much more important. And going off that, today's discussion is on advocacy and youth representation in advocacy. You're all watching us on Galaxy 19 satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Apple TV as well. And to discuss youth representation in advocacy spaces, we have with us Shalina Nurli, who is a young Uyghur activist. Shalina is a university student studying behavioral neuroscience and the youth coordinator for Vancouver Uyghur Association. She's been raising awareness on the Uyghur genocide since 2018. And that is, 3 years now she has been on it. She's been campaigning, protesting, speaking at press conferences. And her goal at the end is to reunite with her family in occupied East Turkestan. Shalina Nurli, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Shalina, I know that you've been doing this work for so many years, but what has kind of sparked your interest in advocacy? Obviously, now there's been more attention around the Uyghur genocide, but I don't believe that was the case back in 2018. Not as many people knew about it. So, what sparked your interest in advocacy work?
I think what you just said, like not many people knew about it. So that's what sparked my interest because I started seeing how horrible my people were being treated. I've always known that there's always been an issue back in East Turkestan, but when we started hearing news of the concentration camps and all the torture and horrible things that go on in it, and nobody was giving it, any attention, that's what really frustrated me and made me want to, be a part of something to make people understand and know what's going on and make people care, because although a lot of people might hear about it, it's hard to make people empathize with it. Some people just hear it, they feel bad, they move on. But my goal wasn't just to like make everyone hear it, but also make everyone feel the same amount of emotional pain that we do, and to understand what's going on. It doesn't just affect like Uyghurs, but like it should affect everyone else. It should have I should have an influence on what everyone else thinks as well.
That's so interesting that not only was your goal to raise awareness, obviously that is one part of it, but you wanted to mobilize, the population, mobilize your community. How have you gone about that? What is the work that you've done? Tell us about that.
I think, well, when I first started, it was mainly on social media. It was mainly just, posting infographics, posting information about the situation. And then it was when I came back to Vancouver, when we started planning protests. And we first started off just doing regular protests, trying to get people's attention. But once we started getting a good amount of people's attention, we started working with Hong Kongers in Vancouver. And as well as Tibetans as well. And we came together, we formed an alliance. And from there, we've held press conferences, and we've also held campaigns where we try to raise more awareness, not just between the people, but also in the government of Canada as well. And you guys probably know, like only a couple of months ago, the Canadian government recognized the Uyghur situation as genocide, and that's from all of the hard work that all the Uyghurs in Canada have been putting in. So I think that's one of the few outcomes that we've seen as Uyghurs in the community of Canada, as well as our alliances and our allies.
Right. And so, like, to our audience, we can see that your work actually has impacts in the government level. This is not just, obviously, you do work on the ground, you're mobilizing groups, you're holding protests, but at a government level, you guys are making changes in Canada. But how has this journey been so far for you, right? You are in university right now, you're a student, you have a lot of other responsibilities. How have you been able to manage all of this together?
To be honest, when I first started it, it didn't feel too much, just because, like I said, everything was on social media. But when we started holding protests and holding campaigns, and the more effort that it took, the more, I guess you could say, conflicting it got, because I have my own school studies as well, and it's hard to balance it out sometimes. But I think those are just like maybe like the physical challenges of it, but the most important challenges were probably the mental challenges, because we don't, although like we have seen some outcomes, there's always genocide deniers, people who support the CCP, people who, are Islamophobic, who are against our situation, who will always be putting misinformation and putting false news on social media, which makes it 10 times more harder to get our story out there. So I think the mental exhaustion, as well as knowing that our family members could be in danger of what we're doing, of the advocacy that we're putting in, can be very exhausting. And I know it's not just for me, but lots of other Uyghurs as well, because a lot of Uyghurs, the reason why some Uyghurs don't do advocacy is because they're worried about their family's lives back home. So the Uyghurs that do advocacy, they're always worried. For example, for me, although I know that some of my family members are in camps and some are not, it's always like a matter of when is it going to be that the rest of my family members are going to go in these camps because of what I'm saying. So it's a struggle when it comes to balancing like advocacy as well as your school life or your regular life, but it's also a struggle when it comes to your mental health.
And how do you cope with that? I mean, you are constantly out there. You are putting yourself out there, speaking about the genocide of your people. You have family back in camps right now that could be impacted, like you said, by the work that you do. How do you, deal with that? That is a lot for a young student to have to deal with. That is a large mental toll. And, just to kind of hear your passion. I know that you're passionate about this, but, how do you not burn out? How do you stay focused?
To be honest, I don't know if I've figured out a way to cope with it or not burn out from it, just because again it's still very new, only 2-3 years now. But I think maybe one way that sometimes it does get easier is seeing the sense of community within the Uyghurs internationally, because before all this happened, I don't think I knew many Uyghur people. I only knew the Uyghurs that I lived in the city with. But once we started connecting worldwide, internationally, I've made a lot more friends, a lot more people that I connect with, that I understand these things with. We're on the same level. And also with the outcomes, the good outcomes that we've seen, I think those things make it the worthwhile, make it more easier for us to continue on with what we're doing.
Now, Shalina, obviously being Uyghur, you are a minority, right? In America, in Canada, you guys are the minority. There are not that many Uyghurs, and like you said, that the a lot of Uyghurs who are in Canada, who are in America, are afraid to speak up because of the repercussions their family might face back home. So, how do you balance being one of the few voices for such a large group of people, right? You are technically a voice for the voiceless. How do you direct yourself in that?
I think for me, I always have people that I look up to within the Uyghur community. There's a lot of Uyghur youths who've done a lot more and who are out in the front line. And I always look up to them and I look at what they're doing and how they've handled certain situations. Because for me, again, I'm still very new at this. I'm not a politician. It's not my degree or anything like that. So I always do look up to other youths in our community, as well as looking up to the elders in our community, because it's them who like kind of started like this passion in our hearts for us to fight for our people, to fight for our freedom. So I always look up to the other people in our community. So I think that's how I balance it out. If I think I understood your question like that, let me know if I understood it wrong.
No, no, I think that that was kind of my question. And the fact that you're getting inspiration from those that have done, like you said, more work than you, those who have more experience than you, it's probably something that keeps you grounded
Yeah.
and keeps you focused. Shalina, I want to ask you, how do you feel about the advocacy space surrounding the Uyghur situation? Do you feel that there are enough Muslims in that space? Are there even enough Uyghurs in that space? How do you feel about that?
I mean, when it comes to if there's enough Uyghurs, I think there's quite a bit more people that are advocating compared to maybe 2-3 years ago. And I think that's because a lot of us have realized, like staying quiet is not going to change anything. The CCP still has the power over us if we stay quiet, whether we stay quiet or we don't, and it's better to just speak up. But when it comes to the Muslim community, I think overall there has been a increase, and we are really grateful for the organizations, for the people that give us a platform, for the people who do help us in advocacy, in advocating the situation. But again, I think there's still a lot more work that needs to be done. There's a lot more advocacy that needs to be done, I think, in my opinion, from the Muslim community. And I think the only thing we can hope for is that hopefully as time goes on, maybe people will start understanding that it's not just, you know, you hear about it, you post it on social media, and then you move on. You have
Mhm.
to put work into it. You have to mobilize other people as well. Just listening to the situation and just saying, "Oh, that's really sad," and moving on doesn't really do us any good. Although we do appreciate the empathy, but I think for like the Muslim community, there is a bit more work that needs to be done.
That's interesting. Do you feel that a lot of Muslim youth might engage in maybe performative activism and not do the work on the ground? Is that the case?
I mean, I can't speak for anyone's actions or for their intentions, just because God knows best, and I don't know what their intentions are. But I feel like maybe some people will. I don't think it's performative activism. I don't think they do it knowingly, but I do think people assume that it's enough to just give a post or just to like give a shout out about the situation. But I think over time, with enough education, with enough information, if we start to understand that that's not all it takes, there needs to be a lot more done, then I think as the youth, the Muslim youth can do a lot more.
And we'll talk about what exactly they can do. What are some steps that our audience can do to get involved in the fight that you are fighting, Shalina? You are all watching us on Galaxy 19 Satellite, MuslimNetwork.tv, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Apple TV as well. We'll be right back after our short break.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an...
Our neighbors don't realize that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
60 shots! No me! No justice! No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world? You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned has brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
Young Uyghur activist Shalina has been involved since 2018 in fighting against and speaking up for Uyghurs and fighting against the Uyghur side. Shalina, I ask, what is your opinion? What is your message to those who are hesitant to get involved in advocacy work, to young people who don't really know where to start, but they do appreciate advocacy work? Where can they get started?
I think social media makes things a lot easier. When I say social media, I don't just mean reposting or posting or sharing. I mean finding the right accounts, finding the right organizations, and following them and keeping up to date with what they've been doing and if they have any campaigns coming up. For example, there's some campaigns like Campaign for Uyghurs. So they're they're an organization, and they have campaigns once in a while. For example, I think about a month ago we had a campaign for ending forced labor, where we sent letters out to Nike, Zara, and Apple, and we also had people commenting. So it was a whole 3-day campaign, and we have campaigns like that once in a while. So I think it's all about finding the right accounts, finding the right people that can help you get started, and as well keep up to date with what's going on in the Uyghur community and what our next movements are.
I'm glad that you clarify that, right? Just not only retweet, not only tweet, but actually following the right people, making sure that you're keeping up to date with their campaigns. I think that is definitely something that all of the young people who are watching can do. It is not, it's not something that takes a lot of time, I feel like, but it is something that hopefully they can dedicate whatever time they do have to it. Shalina, to the Muslim community, what do you think that the elders in our community, the organizations in our community can do to encourage young people to get involved?
I mean, for us, for the Uyghur elders, what they did for us to get us into involve these things was growing up constantly. We were reminded of our people. We were reminded of, who we were, our history, and a sense of like, I don't know what the word in English is. I forgot for the word in English, but basically we call it like vatan sevar, so which means like like loving your land. Basically, we have a sense of that growing up. And so when all this started happening, there was a lot of youths who weren't as involved, but with talks from our parents, talks from the elders telling us, like the fight isn't for their generation, but it's for our generation and the generation to come. So I think that's some kind of way that maybe the Muslim elders in different communities can get these kids to get involved, is because I think most of the time maybe youths think, this isn't my fight. People older than me, people more educated can do this. I can't really do much, which is not always the case, because it's when a group of people come together, that's when we have the power. Like one individual won't have the power. So I think if Muslim elders, taught the youth about the importance of coming together and being united, not just as like cultural differences, like ethnic groups or anything, but together as Muslims, that would be super helpful. And along with that, like I said, like just teaching them about how it's not just the older generations fight, but it's the younger generations. Because at the end of the day, what we're fighting for the Uyghur situation, our parents are going to move on, and we're going to move on. It's going to be for our kids and our future's kids and our kids and kids. Basically, it's a cultural issue. We trying to do this so we don't lose our culture, we don't lose our people, and so millions of people in camps aren't killed, aren't tortured. So I think that's two ways that probably Muslim elders could help the youths get involved.
And I like that you say, beyond these cultural ethnic barriers, just as Muslims, we should be there at any time of difficulty for another Muslim, no questions asked. And I think that you do a really good job of emphasizing that. And you say that your parents and their parents have also taught you guys that. And hopefully our elders can, take a bit of a lesson from that. But Shalina, you have been doing this work for 3 years. What are some challenges that have come up, during that time, and how have you been able to address those?
Well, the biggest challenge I think I mentioned earlier, it was always being afraid of when, like, matter of when the matter of time was for my family back home to be involved with my advocacy. Every time we do a protest, every time I'm on some kind of news article or anything, my name is on it and there's a picture of me, I do get a sense of worry in me, because I'm like, last time it was okay, last time nothing happened, but what if this time something happens? Like, what if maybe next time? I don't know. It's always like this fear in me, because I'm always worried, because I don't want to be responsible. Obviously, nobody wants to be responsible. Nobody wants to have that burden on themselves. But I think how I overcome that is just looking at the bigger picture, because I think that's, like I said, again, that's what stops a lot of Uyghurs from speaking out. And if that's the case, I feel like that's the Chinese government kind of having its power over me. And if I keep quiet and if everyone else keeps quiet for the sake of their own family, then I don't think we'll ever achieve anything. And I think there will be some sacrifices made, although I would rather not have any sacrifices made. I hope nothing happens, and I hope it goes on like this, and I hope my actions don't influence my family back home. But I think that's one of the biggest challenges that do affect the activism that I do, as well as other Uyghurs too.
I feel like you say it like, you're just talking about anything else, just so normally and casually, perhaps because you've talked about this so much. But the fact that you're able to say that I'm making a sacrifice, that I'm speaking up for my people, even though I know that there might be so many more difficulties that come my and my family's way, is extremely courageous. And I think that it puts a lot of responsibility on people like me who are not Uyghur, who don't have family back in East Turkestan, to speak up, because we have a privilege. We have the privilege of, not having to worry for our family. So I really do hope that the young people who are watching this are inspired by your work. Shalina, do you, when you're doing your work, I'm sure you get the feedback. I've seen the work that you've done in the past. Do you get a lot of people telling you that they feel empowered by your work, that they feel inspired by your work, and how does that make you feel?
Well, yeah, I think I've had some few people say that, and honestly, it's very nice to hear. But I think for me, I always get inspired by other people's work, so I kind of I do relate with when people do say things like that. For example, like I said, within the Uyghur community, there's so many people that I look up to, and like you said about making sacrifices, there's people who make bigger sacrifices. For example, I have my family here with me. I have my mom and my dad, my immediate family, and the rest of my family, like my relatives, are all back home. But there's people whose parents are back in home, back in East Turkestan. There are people whose siblings are back in East Turkestan. For example, my parents as well. But they're go these like for example, I didn't grow up with my cousins. I mean, I've seen them. I've been back a few times. I've lived with them for about 5 years, from age 0 to age 5. That's about it. But other people, they've lived there their entire lives. They've made real connections. They've made meaningful connections with their family members. They grew up with their siblings and everything, but yet they're still sacrificing so much. So I always look up to them. So when people do say things like, "Oh, what you're doing is really cool," I feel really empowered. I feel very grateful, but at the end of the day, I always think of other people who do a lot more. Sometimes I don't even like saying that I'm an activist, just because um, I feel like there's a lot more people who are more qualified for the term. Because I feel like right now, in this day, like if you just post a thing on Instagram or you do a little bit of infographic, you can be labeled as an activist, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. But for myself, when I see people out in the field really do these work, go to government parliaments, fight with, create campaigns and everything like that, I feel like I look up to them, and I feel so powered by them. So when people kind of, label me as an activist, I get really shy and I get really humbled, and I'm very thankful and grateful for it. But again, I have so much people that I look up to as well. So
I want to say that you inspire a lot of people, including myself. The work that you are doing is amazing, and you have been doing it. I hope and I pray that you don't burn out. And I'm so proud of the work. This whole thing has just been so empowering for me. Yeah, so I just want to thank you for being here with us today, Shelly.
Thank you so much. Sorry, you cut off for a bit. That's why I was just like looking at the camera.
Yeah, I apologize. But
No,
yeah,
it's
I just
okay.
want to thank you for being here with us, and really you're an inspiration to a lot of young people, myself
Thank you
included.
so much
Thank
for
you.
giving us like a platform to talk about this. Thank you guys for, giving us an opportunity to share our stories and everything. Thank you.
Yep, and thank you to our audience for tuning in to this week's episode about advocacy, as well as learning a bit more about the Uyghur situation and how you can get involved. And until next week, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you.